For those of you that have been to Passport in the past, you know that we've had terrific speakers from Jeffrey Sachs to Melinda Gates to Paul Farmer. And so our dilemma was, how do we top that? And so we talked to Joe Sorrell, a good friend of ours at the Gates Foundation, and Joe said 2 words, Hans Rosling. If you guys can get Hans to come to Passport, everybody in Seattle will be talking about it the next day. So we're thrilled that we got him. Dr. Rosling is a physician and a researcher. He co-founded Doctors Without Borders in Sweden. He's been an advisor to the World Health Organization and UNICEF, and is a professor at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. On top of all that, he founded Gapminder Foundation, which provides free software to illustrate how countries are pulling themselves out of poverty. He's going to use that software tonight to shatter some myths, open your mind, and introduce you to the beauty of statistics. I tell you, from somebody that almost flunked quantitative methods 515 twice, I didn't know the beauty of statistics actually existed. So I was, would have been great to have Professor Rosling around when I was in grad school. I would really thank you for joining me and welcoming Dr. Hans Rosling.
An invitation to Seattle is a thrill for any medical researcher because you are on top on the league table of winning Nobel Prizes. An invitation for someone who spent his life doing research on diseases of the poor and teaching global health, it's the best invitation you can get. I was asked at the table, why did you come? I said, when Seattle calls you, come. It's as easy as that. I'm going to try to give you a fact-based worldview. When I teach my students in Sweden about the world, they have a diverging worldview. Their mind is set like the G7, and they talk about we and them. Some say, we have to help them because they are so sick. And others say, no, they are so corrupt, they have to manage themselves. And when they come back into class, when I hear this discussion, I ask them, what do you mean with them and we? Oh, it's very easy, it's the West and it's the developing world. Aha, so there are 2 types of countries in the world. Yes, we learned that in college, they said. We learned it's 2 types of countries. So what is the criteria? Oh, everyone knows who is West and who's... Where's Japan? I said. Well, Japan is sort of, yeah, it's a West. It's West, they said. Okay, where is Turkey? I said. Turkey, yeah, it's a developing country. And Russia? Well, Russia, they said. Yeah, and Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, they said, then they would say Borat, and that would be the end of it. And then I asked them about other countries, and very soon they said, don't ask us about all these countries. We had problem-based learning. We don't know them. But we remember very well the teaching about the tremendous difference between the West and the developing countries. It's awful how the world is. They are so poor in that area, and we are so rich. But what is the criteria? You are at university now. What is the criteria? And then a young student, she said, so they have long life and small family here. That's what we have. Huh? Father and mother and 2 kids who go on holiday. And there they have a short life in a large family. And I like this definition because it's sharp criteria. So I can pick the 2 indicators I need, life expectancy and fertility rate. And that was actually the sort of starting point when we did this software. You can see here what we have done is that we have created bubbles, and I'm so touched here by all these bubbles you have done to honor me here. Yeah, this is not the digital version, this is the analog version of the program. You can see here that the size of the bubble is population. The big bubble there is China, and this one is India. And the color is the area. The yellow ones here is the Americas, the dark blue is Africa, green Middle East, light blue is South Asia, and then East Asia and Pacific, brown is Europe. And this axis here is children per woman. 2 children, 3 children, 5 children, and 7 children per woman. So small family that way and large family that way. And here we have life expectancy, 30 year, 50 year, 70 years. That is long life and short life. And the students are right. You see 2 types of countries. These countries here, the West, they have small families and long life, and the rest here, the developing world, the rainbow nations here, they have large families and short life. But this was 1950. That's 60 years ago. And this is the tragedy of the mind of the Swedish students. You see, the mindset about the world they have correspond to the true reality, the year their teachers were born. And we need an upgrade. So that's why we decided we cannot just have graphics, we need animation. So now I'm going to change the world. And where do you think it is today? What do you think has happened with this country? We're just about to celebrate 50-year anniversary of the pill later this year. And have they started family planning? Do they live here? Have they benefited from hygiene and better food and vaccines and antibiotics, and they live up there? Have they come to the middle? There was some sort of intermediate. Have you seen the intermediates there? It's Cuba. It's very interesting. Cuba was, this is when Castro went to school and to university. And actually Cuba was somewhere in between the United States and Mexico at that time. It's quite amazing to nominate yourself as a leader of a group you don't belong to. Yeah. It really was. But otherwise, most of them, there were 5 to 6 children. You can see the Arab world down here. You can see all these countries here. Now I'm going to start the world, and we are going to see if your worldview corresponds to the reality. Where do you think the bubbles will end up 2007? Ready, steady, go. Here we can see that smallpox vaccination was good, better hygiene. Mao Zedong brought China there, but then stupid central planning brought him down there. And then it came up here, and he started family planning. He learned from the mistake. Can you see Latin America moving here towards smaller families? They don't care about the religion. They move there with family planning over here. Here we have India coming now to smaller families. The Arab countries get a long life, but not so small. But here family planning is coming among the Muslims also, and they are moving this way. Africa now is hit by the HIV epidemic, and you can see their countries falling, but the rest of the world ends up in this corner with a small family and a long life, and the Swedish students are wrong. It's quite amazing, isn't it? It's quite amazing what has happened. I think often when we want to argue for taking care of the big health problems in the world, we just talk about the problem. We don't talk about the successes we have had in the past. We identified fast population growth as a problem, developed the technology the young couples needed, got the information through. United States funded the World Fertility Study. We measured this. We saw that it worked. It's quite amazing. Look here, if I compare United States here, 1952, United States, and I pick Egypt down there, just in the center here. I take the other ones away. Egypt, 6 children per woman, 42 years. They had malaria all the way up to the Mediterranean at that time. Diarrheal disease was rampant, malnutrition existed, schooling of women was limited, and then this happened. United States, of course, what you expect little smaller families and a longer life, and this is what happened. Were you aware that Egypt today is like United States 1966? They have catched up. They moved faster. And it's very natural that you can catch up, because now exist vaccines and antibiotics and knowledge, and you just need to translate the textbooks. The countries who were in the forefront of economic growth, of leading technology development and health improvement, they had to invent and do research while they were going. You can catch up if you have a reasonable way of doing it. Look, yes, if we look at another interesting comparison I always used to do, is to compare Vietnam here with the United States. Sorry, I have to do it like this here. It's sort of live here. The numbers are on a server in northern Sweden. And then through the internet I can do the magic here on stage. And there is Vietnam 1968, and we have relatively good data on this, and that's the catch-up. Vietnam today has a life expectancy longer than the United States had when Senator McCain came back from that long period in prison in Hanoi. It's interesting, isn't it? We don't have this. I had Vice President Al Gore coming up and shaking me and whispered and said, I didn't know that. I didn't have the slightest idea. And he's sort of a person who consumes statistics on a regular basis. You know? And yet, you know, we haven't grasped that the world is up in this corner. It has been very successful. Now, if I change children per woman and go for income instead, then you will see something. But before that, let's consider what this is. What are we measuring here? We are measuring what happens in the bedroom. Whether the young couple have pillow talk and whisper in each other's ear, our children shall go to school. We shall buy shoes to them. They should have a guitar. We should be able to buy a football for them. There are modern couples in the world who will fight for their children, and they decide to have 2 or 3 of what they can afford. And this is the bathroom and the kitchen. If you have water and soap to wash yourself and you have food on the table, you live 65 years. Then you need our biomedical research to live a little longer and everyone to go there. But we should be a little humble. Basic economic growth and schooling is the most important for health. But we are needed, but we shouldn't boast too much, you know. We know what's really all the work which is being done in families and societies that brings them up here. So they are already up here. Now, if I should see the living room, whether they have a TV, they have a sofa, I have to go for income per person. I'm swapping this axis here to income per person. Now you have GDP per capita in inflation-adjusted purchasing power dollars, those comparable dollars that the economists can do at their very best. And Vietnam hasn't catched up at all. They are here in money. They are far behind the United States in money, but they've catched up in health. It's quite interesting, isn't it? And how far back do we have to take US to find the same economic level as we have in Vietnam today? Yeah, you're back to 1870, 1860. That means that the socialist period in Vietnam truly brought education to people and basic health service and training, but it didn't grow the economy. That was the big failure, and that's why they swapped, and they are now running a market economy. And they will grow very fast, because now they have healthy people. Look at the difference. They became healthy first, and then you see economic growth. We also hope we will see more of democracy and freedom of speech in Vietnam, which hasn't come yet. But things come in different sequences in countries. They don't follow the same sequence as other countries have done. And we can look a little of the income distribution. I shall go down there to do this. Look here. Dollar per day. $1, $10, $100 per day. This now is not national account. It's based on the income surveys, which is guided by the World Bank and compiled here by Yuri Dikhanov, the best company. So it's serious data behind these Walt Disney animations I have, you know. I want Disney in the front and I want Chris Murray in the back. That's more or less my motive, what I want. So here, if I ask the whole world population to come in, and where is people standing? They come down, everyone come down. They stand on their daily income. And this is how the income distribution is in the world. The last year when we have income service in all countries. We have income service only with 5 to 8 years intervals. So the most common income is $2 per day. And the interesting thing is that if we look at the money, 100% of the daily income in purchasing power, that's that coin. It divides accordingly here. 20% richest in the world, they get 74%, and the 20% poorest, they get 2%. And the middle income countries, the emerging economy, BRIC countries, they have 24% of the world economy. Before the crisis, they had the majority of the growth, and during the crisis, they had most of the growth, and in the future, they will continue to have so. This is a very different situation from here. And this is my main message. The dichotomy of the world into a Western world and the rest is gone. Forget it. It doesn't exist. Tom Friedman had said it very, very amply when he says the flat world has come. He discovered it in Bangalore. Jeff Sachs is saying the converging world. The world is coming together. So now I would like to show you the pattern of the converging world. Let me just go over here and see. $1 or $1.25 per day, it's the poverty line. It's not an abstract line. It's where you go to bed hungry. It's where the family use 90% of their resources for their calorie need. And they can't buy shoes. They can't buy tablets. This is where some of the diseases have the highest burden on which Seattle BioMed are focusing their research. And it's not only that you need the treatment and prevention for these diseases, they must be cost-effective and cheap also to work. So this is a double challenge to develop the solutions for these diseases. The poverty line is here. Now, where is Africa? This is Africa. Africa has a wide income distribution. There are parts of Africa which are doing quite well. Others is in miserable stagnation and in war. But the diversity within Africa, this is the OECD, as close as we can get to a definition of the West. But remember, 2 weeks before the earthquake, Chile joined the OECD and became a Western country. Mexico has already joined. This is Latin America. It's like a green anaconda. You find any income in the world. You find Mr. Slim over here, and then you have all the way here. You have all the different incomes in the world. This is East Europe becoming very Latin America-like. This is East Asia and the Pacific, and this is South Asia with India. Now, how did it look like when I was a young student? By serendipity and privilege, I studied public health in Bangalore, 1970. Then the world looked like this. Most of the poverty in the world then was in China and India, in East Asia and in South Asia. And Africa didn't look that bad. And then you can see the brown here, East Europe. The Soviet system tried to overtake the OECD, the market economy. They did their best within that rigorous central planning, but they failed. They never catched up economically. And then what happens in the world instead was the following. That the population was growing, and many hundreds of millions and billions got out of poverty, and the world kept moving forwards until the doorstep of Lehman Brothers. Then it came to a stop here. And it went a little backwards, and then, because this is a projection, I can't use the projections any longer. Because actually, some countries slipped back, others continued. But more or less, this is what will happen. What will happen? The tragedy is that the number of people in poverty is the same. Population is growing, the percent in poverty is falling. That's the good news. The bad news is that the number in poverty is the same. We are not bringing everyone with us in this good part of globalization. And basically, as a public health professor, I love money because it's explained 80% of the health status in the world. So it's actually, but you have to use it wisely also. It's also how you use it, but mainly you need the economic level to improve the health. So how should we do? What are the sort of diseases? What are the diseases we are seeing here? If I go back to 2010, here we have malaria. Here we have trypanosomiasis, or TRIP as we call it, the sleeping sickness. Tuberculosis we have all the way to here. And then we have cancer from here to here. And we have a new pattern of disease in the world. Now, people who live at this poverty level, investing in health for them is not only a charity for someone who suffers. It's a direct help to speed off their own capacity of getting out of poverty and creating decent countries and lives. And I think one should view it more as an investment than as a charity, what you are doing here at BioMed and those who are supporting you. So if I would go over to my slide, I would show the following. This is a normal PowerPoint I have here. Trypanosomiasis is very important. I was glad to see that you are doing research on that. Because trypanosomiasis is a disease which is exclusively affecting the poor. Malaria goes a little further. Tuberculosis, as we say in Sweden, goes all the way to St. Petersburg. Because middle-income countries still have a burden. It's a very tricky disease, tuberculosis, because it takes such a long term. You have to be steady over decades to get it under control. It's not a quick fix. HIV, we know the special dilemma with that disease. Pneumonia and diarrhea has to be mentioned. They were forgotten. When the BBB, Blair, Bono, and Bush, when they decided on the policy for global health, they forgot pneumonia and diarrhea. We call it the ATM diseases. You've heard about the ATM? The money machine where you can get money. If you have AIDS, tuberculosis, or malaria, there's money. If you have pneumonia and diarrhea, there's no money. I know that Gates Foundation is thinking very clearly about this and correcting this. It's difficult where we should go. Should we go for vaccine or antibiotics? Should we go for sanitation or should we go for clinical treatment? It's a challenge, but we have to remember those two. So what is it we need to say? Well, there's trypanosomiasis, there's malaria, there's tuberculosis, that's HIV and AIDS. There's a very special thing with trypanosomiasis. Malaria, you will not have so much help. Tuberculosis, I think China should put a lot of money into tuberculosis research, and they are doing together with Brazil. We have to realize the average income of each disease. I try to challenge Chris Murray to calculate the income of each disease and the income distribution, because that's how we can solve it. Underserved markets, I heard. I think that is a very, very good word. How do we solve the problem here? Because we need the corporate sector to participate in developing the drugs even here. But it's a completely different thing from what we can do in China and Brazil there in the middle. So is things then getting better? Many say, oh, this working with the health of Africa, it won't work, you know, it's so hopeless. So we did this graph on the MDG. And this is basically, I have to put full screen there. Income in dollar here, every bubble is a country, but I simplified it. Brown is industrialized countries, yellow developing countries, as we rightly divided it 1959. Child mortality here, high child mortality, low child mortality. MDG 4, the best of the Millennium Development Goal, is getting child mortality down. And one of the major things is malaria, of course. Because that's what creates the very high levels of child mortality, is malaria is part of that. And this is what happened. Can you see? Economy is growing. This is why I like money. Economy is growing, child mortality is falling. Economy is growing, child mortality is falling. It's pretty impressive. And can you see the circle for the industrialized countries is now entirely occupied by the developing countries? I foresaw the sale of Volvo to China many years ago. And my argument is that Volvo will not move from Sweden. Sweden moved from Volvo. China today has exactly the same health and the same income level as Sweden had when Volvo started its expansion in the 1950s. So it's the same level where everyone really wanted to get their car. That's where China is today. The big one here is China. But how fast did it go? I think this average annual rate of reduction of child mortality is a very good measure. It's UNICEF who introduced it. That means we should reduce child mortality with 4.3% per year. Everyone who is interested in economics understands what that is. That's a growth of survival, but it goes down. Child mortality goes down with about the speed we want the economy to go up. And to compare it, I've decided to throw Sweden backwards, 100 years backwards in history. 100 years ago, Sweden landed up there. We had a very high child mortality, 150, actually higher than India have today, in spite of us having the same economy as India. And interestingly enough, the child mortality in Sweden 1900 was the same as in Bangladesh 1990. So Bangladesh was 90 years after. Ready, steady, go. Here we go. Can you see Bangladesh, in spite of a low economic level, they are falling faster than Sweden, and they are using the aid amazingly well, and they fall with 4.7% per year. Faster than Millennium Development Goal rates. And 1916, we can give Sweden the second chance. We are going to run against Egypt. that had the same child mortality there. Ready, steady, go, here we go. But Egypt, they got a lot of aid from US, they got clean water, they got malaria eradication, and they got primary health care 5.5%. It's amazing, it's faster than Millennium Development Goal rate. Sweden has its third chance against Brazil. Sweden 1932 was Brazil 1919. Here we go. Brazil was quite rich. They had inequity. And here child mortality is falling very, very fast. In spite of this being a good period for Sweden, Brazil won. My students used to protest at this level. They said, this is not fair. Because Brazil and Bangladesh, they had vaccines, they had antibiotics, and we had to run barefoot. We want fair, real-time competition. Okay, I'll give you marshland on the equator, the most tropical of all nations, Singapore. And we start the year when I was born. Sweden had a big disadvantage, and Singapore had been through a war. Yeah, this is the sort of competitions we like, the Swedish students say. Here we go. Here we go. Sweden is continuing to fall in child mortality. They get independent, they get rid of malaria, they get economic growth, they invested wisely in education and health, they get tertiary health care, and they catch up with Sweden and they win. Singapore today has the lowest child mortality in the world. And it was only 2 years ago that UNICEF stopped calling them developing countries. There's something wrong in the head and the terminology. We have to stop thinking about two types of countries. The world has become much more complex than that. We must see that things can change. This is the converging world. George W. Bush did a good thing convening the G20 meeting. That was the end of the Second World War, many say. Now it's not the G7 that runs the world any longer. You have to have Brazil, Russia, India, China in it. And the G20, represent the middle-income countries. Low-income countries is below $2,000 in purchasing power parity, and this is above $10,000. And here we have the collapsed countries. Afghanistan, Somalia, those terrible civil war situations. But there are quite few people living in there. There is where aid is doing most good. The 2 billion poorest people, they deserve aid. Emerging markets shouldn't have aid. Sweden has been giving aid to China up to this year. Can you imagine? Government aid to China. That has 2.4 trillion US dollar in a foreign exchange reserve. And then they borrow to the United States to the bubble. It's very bad use of Swedish aid money. Finally, we are going to stop now. And this is because the concept of developing countries kept continuing, And here we have West, but 20% of high-income countries are not West. They are Buddhists, they are Hindus, they are Muslims, they are not Western culture. 2 billions, 3 billions, 1 billion. Actually, we are talking about the 2 billions when we talk about the poor aspects of global health. Infections and malnutrition is what they have. Here we have depression and injury. The most common cause of death in young women in China today, in rural China, is suicide. And the most common way to commit suicide is to drink agricultural pesticides. And this is not, wow, and I'm in the heartland of medical knowledge here. And you say, well, it's not known. We haven't grasped this drama of the emerging market and the middle-income countries. They have really a dramatic situation. It's not the paradise. Yes, you get away malaria, everything is not good. There's a lot of other things to take care of once you've moved there. Cancer and cardiovascular again. Pfizer has now two new market sections. One is emerging economies, the other is established products. They have to sell the new patented drug at a lower price in the emerging markets. They have found out that brand is more important than patent. We have to have more clever business models. I always honored Microsoft for producing software that could be pirated so easy in poor countries. And then it could be used, the Office package, all the way out in poverty. But when people start a business and they enter into world economy, they should go and pay the license. And due diligence should be upon them. But that availability of software all the way out has been quite nice. And now it's good. Now they're used to use Microsoft and not open Office. So once they get economic growth, they will continue with Microsoft. I think that's something the drug sector should learn from. Yeah, we are getting osteoporosis and dementia, isn't it? The only thing you can hope for is to get the dementia first, so you don't remember all the pain you have every day. That's my hope. Yeah. Now, how are we going to be able to do this? Can it work in Africa? Yes. This is one of the women in my research in Africa. She told me, I'm very happy about the school. Now I go to the market to sell my products. I cannot be cheated. I'm very happy for the mosquito net. Thank you very much for the mosquito nets. Now I have a healthy child that can go with me. And I love the asphalt. Thank you, World Bank, for the credits to build the asphalt road. I can reach further. And I also like the information. The cell phone was excellent in my village because now I know the prices. And the market or job is what I want. And the microcredits gave me this bicycle, or gave me, I borrowed to it. I'm going to pay it off. And most important, I want to have my freedom so I can make my own decision. I made this graph so those of you who are a little leftish and red, you have your stuff on this side here. And those of you who are more market-oriented and more to the right, you have your blue stuff on this side. Because this is what I have. I think I'm evidence-based and say that successful countries are those who have good government, a strong corporate sector, and a vibrant civil society that can interact in decent ways. And this is what this woman does. She wants to bring her children out of poverty. She's the one who's going to do it. She will work hard. Aid is not going to bring her out of poverty, but she's very thankful for getting that decisive health of getting malaria out of the family, getting treatment for those terrible diseases that can enable her to be productive and get the family out of these terrible things. There are also other heroes. Ibrahim is one of my heroes. Some people call him the Bill Gates of Africa. What did he do? He was a software engineer and made the software where you can calculate where to put the masts for the cell phone system. He started Celtel and provided mobile cell phone services in Africa and also jobs selling the cards for that. Then he sold to Zain for over $3 billion. I like this map. This is the map of Celtel. It looks at the deployment map for UN peacekeeping troops, doesn't it? And those are the countries in which he, with good business that was useful for the society, in which he earned a profit, he could develop those countries. And cell phones are extremely important for health also. I could go into the details of that. And then he started Ibrahim Foundation. And some said you should have put your money to health, but I think he did something wiser. He started the African Leadership Prize. And he gave the prize to the African president that resigned in democratic manners after having done a good job. And there's a little queue. There's a little queue. I think Ghana is the next one to get. It's very interesting. I think that was a good way of him to focus on governance, because he's close to the reality. He had grown up in Sudan and he was trained in Egypt. So it is a task for us which are at the distance to follow him. He will do that. So I want to give this very positive signs from Africa and stop by just showing you this, which I think is very important. Because what is the main question we get when we are not in an official dinner? When I get SMS from students or when I talk at a bar, they say, this Gates Foundation, they are saving the poor children and they will destroy the planet. Or this aid and this research in malaria will just make world population grow and it will destroy the planet. There will be more people just to create a mess for the environment. This is not an ethical problem, that statement. It's just wrong. It's wrong. It's an intellectual problem. 1970, child mortality on this axis, number of children here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Big families, high child mortality, small families, low child mortality. And this is not, do you think that family size will go down if child mortality go down? That's nothing you think about, that's the truth. This is what has happened. Can you see? What we need is to bring that rest down. And who is up here? The tragedy of Afghanistan. The tragedy of Afghanistan. And the neighboring country, Iran, is there. See how important it is to know the facts about the countries. Iran has less children per woman than Sweden today. Doesn't mean that I like the government there at all, but it's a fact. They're highly educated people in Iran. They have very good health service staff in Iran, which is doing a great job actually, in spite of a lot of other things. Whereas Afghanistan is a miserable situation, a century away from where Iran is today. We have to know this. And these countries in between, they can move on. And what we hope will happen in the end, I go back to where I started. Here I have life expectancy on this axis. I have fertility rate here. This is where I stopped in my first graph. And this will happen up till when I die. 102 years old, the world will be up there. I think Seattle has a great task in this. I think this is an investment of a better world. Look at the money that goes to Seattle BioMed as an investment for a better and more secure life for your own grandchildren. And we are very happy that Seattle is doing this, because when you do research here, you also do it good with high quality. So this is a good place to invest money in research. Thank you very much.